In this episode, I'm going to be using the compiler to build my GXT application. I'll start by compiling it into the Word with the compiler. I'll use the compileReport to narrow down the builds and the permutations. I'll use setProperty to build one permutation, and after that, I'll incrementally compile for debugging, and I'll run it in a web browser. Okay, to get started, I'm going to go to my Eclipse IDE with the application. The first thing I want to do is create a compiler, and the way I like to do that is right-clicking on the project module, and that'll go debug as compiler. This class path will be passed to the launcher. It is now starting the compiling of the module for my GWT application. While it's compiling, I'm going to go up to the debug configuration, and what I want to look at is the arguments for the configuration. And here it just created a simple configuration where the compiled bits go to the war directory. And it's compiling this module with the log level set to info. In a moment, I'll add a few more arguments here and come back to that. Okay, so it's going to be compiling 48 permutations to start with. And what I'll do is show how to narrow those down to just one permutation. So by default, GXT builds all the possible permutations all the way up to 46 in this configuration of this application. Normally, you can set the properties to boil down the configuration to much less. And the way to do that is go to the permutation guide, and I'll put this in the link of the description. And I have a fact down here that describes what you do to limit the permutations to much less. Now there's a lot of different ways to do this, but the properties are collapsed, so a lot less permutations are built. So back to the IDE, we have built 48 permutations, and what I want to do next is go to the configuration, and I'm going to set the properties and the arguments. Now these properties can be set in Maven configuration, Gradle configuration, or even the GWT module. Let me show the GWT module first. If I go to the GWT module, I can set these properties in here, and typically that's where they are set, but I want to show this configuration done in the launcher for the compiler. So if I go to the launcher arguments, I'm going to add compileReport to start with, because I want to see what's being compiled. This will give me a nice pretty HTML output of what's being compiled, and this helps me drill down what I'm going to do next. So then I'm going to add setProperty, and you can add more than one setProperty, and I'm going to type in user agent equals Safari to start with. Now this is a GWT user property, and then the next one I want to add is another setProperty, and I want to add GXT user agent because GXT has added more properties. Okay, so GXT user agent, I'm going to put Chrome in this case. You can change these to different properties. Okay, I'm ready to start another compile. So I'm going to hit debug on the bottom right, and it will start another compiling sequence. Okay, so now it's going to compile the module again, and this time there should be a lot less permutations built. Okay, I see 3 permutations are going to be built. Okay, the permutations are built, so what I want to do is go to the module and right-click and refresh. And the reason why I want to refresh is I want to show the extras directory, and this has the compile output or compileReport. And if I open up index, open with the web browser, I have the permutations that are being built. So there's 3 permutations. It's showing the properties that are using to create these permutations. So my next goal is to only do one permutation because I want to show you how to incrementally build. So I'll minimize this, and let's look at the launch configuration next. So I'm going to go to the launch configuration, debug configurations, and I'm already on the compiler, so I'll hit arguments. And what I want to do is set 2 more properties. So I'm going to go set property, and this time I want to use user.agent.os equals Mac and set property. And I'll put these properties in the video description as well, so you can do it for yourself. Okay, set property GXT device equals desktop. We also have mobile and tablet. So you can build your system just for that device. Now what I'm not showing is what Super Dev Mode does is it turns off some optimizations, which makes the compiler even much faster. But in this case, I just want to keep it simple with set properties and setting the user agent and such that the compiler only does one permutation. And so I'm going to hit debug, and the compiling is building one permutation. Okay, I can see that it only took 10 seconds. That's much faster. Okay, now that I've done that, I want to add incremental to the compiler, and I'm going to go debug configurations again, and I'm going to go to the arguments, and so I want to add incremental, and that's just hyphen incremental, and that will turn it on. So if I hit debug, this will do an incremental build, so it will use the previous compile, and it will only build the new changes. And you can tell when it has this output here, unification traverse and whatnot. Okay, so it would take a lot less time, so let me do a change. I'm going to go to my application and I'll just change it. And I'm going to just run the compiler again. I'm not sure if it took a little less time or more. I wouldn't be able to tell the difference because I didn't do a full compile versus incremental compile. But the point is if a full compile takes a couple minutes, the incremental compile will take much less time, within the double digits of seconds or less. So I'm not sure. It depends on the project and what you changed. Okay, there's one more thing I want to do. Let's say I was compiling to the war directory and this war directory was on a remote server, which it could be on any server, and you could immediately run it after the compile, but only for the permutations that it built. So I built for Mac and Chrome, so I could only test it in Chrome. I've installed runJetty-run in Eclipse, and I'm going to use that just to show an example of running the web server. But I'm going to run this war directory here. And the way I do that is basically go debug as runJetty-run. And it quickly starts up a web server on localhost 8080. And if you look up, it runs on this context. So if I go to my browser, and I go to localhost 8080, you'll see there's an error, but I have to add the context of the host, and I hit enter, and there's my web app. Okay, so it works great. What if I wanted to change header to something else? So if I go back to my web app, and I'm going to change this is my app. I changed it. Okay, I'm going to run the compiler, and I'm going to go down to the compiler and run it. This will build the changes. Okay, excellent. I'm going to go to the app and reload it. Now this isn't as fast as Super Dev Mode, but it is an option to debug on a remote server with an incremental compile and basically just pushing it to the war directory. So this is sort of like a production build or a limited production build, which I can only test on Chrome at this moment, and maybe Safari, I haven't checked. But it's an excellent option when you get in a bind, you need to test something quickly. You can set the properties in the launch configuration of the compiler and run it locally in the IDE and get those bits pushed to the war directory. Now, if I wanted to trigger a full compile, I basically could get rid of these bits here on the left, extras, GWT unit cache, and the project directory. Oh, I have to refresh to get rid of them. So if I refresh, I'm going to go extras, GWT unit cache, and the project compile directory, and I'm going to delete these. Now it's different depending on the build configuration, but all these items exist in one way or another. So I'm going to delete that. Okay, so if I reload the compiler, it should take a bit longer to compile. So you can see that a full build took much longer. It took 26 seconds. So let me do one more incremental compile build, and I'll just do a quick change of the entry point. Save it, and I'm going to run the compile again. Okay, from 26 seconds down to 14. That's much faster on an incremental compile build. So this concludes this video on showing how to use the compiler to build your application and push it into the war, and setting the properties in the launch arguments. Thanks for watching today. Follow me for more tips and tricks on GXT, and I'll catch you later.